Raleigh seriously has crazy weather, and between hurricanes, tornadoes, ice storms, and more, Raleigh is no stranger to experiencing severe weather. We will take a brief look at Raleigh's crazy weather, and as we brace for impacts from Hurricane Debbie here in early August 2024, we will dive into how impactful Raleigh's severe weather has been over the years, as well as hit on specifics to watch out for when severe weather does arrive. Typical Raleigh weather is very nice, as we do experience all 4 seasons and have plenty of great weather to enjoy all of the amazing outdoors around us. It's one reason that many people actually do relocate here. But locals know to be very cautious of believing any of the weather forecasts, as thunderstorms can pop up quickly or forecasted rainy days all of the sudden turn into a beautiful sunny day. You also can't depend on seasons following typical norms. This summer, for example, like much of the country, saw record level heats with no rain for about 3 weeks. Our temperatures averaged in the mid to upper 90s, but with the humidity, heat indexes were around 115, even setting a record this summer for the hottest day ever recorded at 106 Fahrenheit and a heat index just shy of 118. Other oddities are sometimes we have those beautiful fall and spring temperatures, while other times it gets blazing hot in April and May and even through September. And other times we have mild spring weather well into June. In the winter, we have seen 70-degree days as well as 20-degree days all in the same winter. So Raleigh's weather overall is really great, but it can be very unpredictable. Now let's get into Raleigh's severe weather history, and we'll start with the least impactful and common events and work our way to the most. Tornadoes. Raleigh doesn't get many at all. The worst tornado in recent memory was in November of 1988, where an F4 tornado went through North Raleigh. It got up to a half-mile wide and was on the ground for over 80 miles. It crushed many buildings and homes in its path, such as the Kmart off Glenwood Avenue that's now a Walmart, and sadly 4 were killed and another 157 were injured. Speaking of Raleigh's odd weather, no one suspected a tornado in November of all months. Luckily, that was years ago, and the last tornado since then to do any measurable damage was back in April of 2011, where over 30 tornadoes broke out across the state, one of which was an F3 that went right through downtown Raleigh. It was not nearly as devastating as the tornado back in 1988, but there were still quite a few homes and buildings damaged in the region. Beyond those 2 events, tornadoes are incredibly rare in the greater Raleigh area. We may have 1 or 2 storms each year where we have a tornado warning issued, but that is typically due to just rotation seen in the clouds as they rarely actually touch down. For that reason, no one here has storm shelters, and with very few basements, the main advice for those moving here is to designate a room, a bathroom, or a closet in the middle of your house with no windows to hide in if a tornado does touch down. Before moving into the next category, if you have any real estate needs in the greater Raleigh area, please reach out as our team would love to help you. The next hazard to be cautious of are ice storms. Raleigh doesn't get much snow, and when we do have winter storm events, many times we are right on the line of rain and snow. This leads to many times getting freezing rain and ice instead of your typical snow, which is much more destructive. Raleigh has been the butt of many jokes regarding our inability to handle winter weather, as just inches of wintry mix has shut down the city. Not saying that we don't know how to drive in the snow, and for many years, NCDOT was not equipped to handle some of the storms we experienced, but the ice that develops on the roads is definitely a challenge to drive on, even for the most experienced snow drivers. In January of 2005, we famously let just 1 inch of snow cripple the city. The forecast was just calling for light flurries to hit around midday, so schools were in session and people were at work like a normal day. And the NCDOT did not treat the roadways. But the storm rapidly intensified, and while it only dumped 1 inch of snow, it came down very quickly once it started. This caused everyone to leave work and school at once. Temperatures had been unseasonably cold for days, with the temperature that day in the 20s. So the snow immediately stuck to the untreated roads, and since everyone left at the same time, traffic jams began. With cars sitting on the roadways, the heat from the vehicles melted the snow and then immediately refroze with cold temperatures, turning the roads essentially into an ice rink. Many accidents occurred, 20-minute commutes turned into 8 hours, and some kids were even stranded at school as buses and parents couldn't get there. It was an absolute mess, and Raleigh made the national news. In February of 2014, a very similar similar event occurred, but this time with a few more inches of snow and a topping of freezing rain, leading to the famous Snowpocalypse event where cars again were stranded, and somehow one even got caught on fire, leading to a variety of memes across the country. And another major winter storm occurred in December 2002, where we received up to an inch of ice that cut power for nearly 2 million people, many for up to a week. The ice weighed heavily on the many pine trees in the area, causing them to damage a significant number of power lines in the area. The city was shut down for basically an entire week. Fast forwarding to today, we are much more cautious as it seems like schools are canceled whenever there's even flurries in the forecast. And now the NCDOT is much better equipped with larger fleets of snowplows and salt trucks. And roads are also salted anytime there's a chance of any wintry mix. But regardless of the increased preparation, there's not much you can do when you get a major ice storm. So it's important to be prepared for an extended power outage with plenty of warm blankets for the winter. And definitely stay off the roadways here during winter weather. Lastly, the most common and impactful events for Raleigh are hurricanes. Now, it is rare that Raleigh experiences actual hurricane-force winds, as the last hurricane to really impact the area was Hurricane Fran back in September of 1996. It hit Wilmington as a Category 3 with 115-mile-per-hour winds and went right over the Raleigh-Durham International Airport with peak gusts at 79 miles per hour. Severe flooding occurred in Raleigh with a significant number of trees and power lines down around the area. Kids were out of school for over a week, and it took weeks for the area to return to a semblance of normalcy. Prior to Fran, you would have to go back to Hurricane Hazel in 1954, which is one of the state's worst storms in history, which also went right through Raleigh with hurricane-force winds. Since then, there have been multiple hurricanes that have impacted Raleigh, but none to the extent of either of those storms. On average, Raleigh is impacted about once every year or two by a hurricane, but the typical impacts come as heavy rain and closer to 30 to 40 mile per hour winds. This does cause trees to fall and power to be lost at times, but the impacts are more localized and for most just feels like a long thunderstorm. The major impacts occur at the North Carolina coast, typically east of I-95, which are certainly impacted by the heaviest winds of a hurricane, but are mostly impacted by the flooding. Hurricane Florence in 2018 was one of the state's worst storms ever, as it dumped a record 30 inches of rain in some areas of eastern North Carolina as it stalled out. North Carolina's coastline is unique, and it sticks out in comparison to Georgia and South Carolina, which makes it more susceptible to being in the path of a hurricane. So while Raleigh residents need to be prepared and are definitely watching the hurricane tracks closely, Raleigh residents are not typically worried on an annual basis unless they also own a beach house. Now, when these heavy rain events do occur, you'll definitely want to stay away from roadways near Crabtree Creek, which cuts through the heart of Raleigh. The worst area has historically been the Crabtree Valley Mall, which as its name sits in a valley and is notorious for heavy flooding. So even though a hurricane or tropical storm is staying by the coast, you'll want to avoid driving during the heavy rain events, especially in those areas. So that's Raleigh's severe weather history. If I didn't scare you away, please don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested in moving to the area. I'm Allison Warnerowski with the W Real Estate Group, and thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.